Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if computers can understand what a survey question is really asking? Especially in different languages, this new study dives deep into that very question. We know that computers are getting really good at understanding human language. Think about translation apps or smart assistants. They use something called text embeddings, which basically turn words and sentences into numbers that a computer can process. Researchers are finding that these computer brains can even predict how people will answer questions on surveys before anyone even takes them, just by looking at the wording of the questions. This is super cool because it could help us create better surveys faster and cheaper. But here is the catch. Most of this research has been done using English language tests and fancy, expensive computer models. We don't really know if these computer models work as well for other languages like Spanish, which is spoken by so many people around the world. And importantly, we don't know if the free open source computer models, the ones anyone can use, are good enough for this job. So, a team of researchers decided to put this to the test. They took two Spanish language questionnaires that measure different things. One was the critical thinking disposition scale, which is a pretty straightforward, one-dimensional scale. It measures one main idea, how likely someone is to think critically. The other was the EQ QIM 20, which measures emotional intelligence across 5 different areas. This one is multidimensional, meaning it has several different parts. They then used real data from over 7,000 Peruvian teenagers who took these surveys. The researchers compared two things. First, how similar the survey questions were to each other, based on their meaning as judged by the computer models. And second, how similar the questions were based on how people actually answered them. They used a fancy statistical approach called exploratory graph analysis. Think of it like mapping out how all the questions relate to each other, both based on their words and based on actual responses. Basically, they wanted to see if the computer's understanding of the words in the questions matched up with the relationships they saw when real people answered those questions. They used 4 different open-source computer models that are good with multiple languages, including Spanish. This is where it gets interesting. What did they find? Well, the big news is that the computer models did a pretty good job. All the models showed some level of agreement between the meaning of the words and how people answered the questions. This means that the words used in a survey question actually carry information about how that question will relate to others, even before anyone answers it. However, not all computer models were created equal. One family of models, called the Multilingual and large models, perform the best and most consistently across the board. This suggests that how a model is trained and the amount of Spanish language data it was exposed to makes a big difference. Models that saw a lot of Spanish and were trained specifically to understand semantic similarity performed better. There was also a really intriguing finding about how the models handle different types of surveys. For the simpler, one-dimensional critical thinking scale, the basic multilingual and large model did just as well, or even slightly better than its instructions and tuned version. An instructions and tuned model is one that you can give specific prompts to, telling it exactly what to do with the text. But when it came to the more complex, 5-dimensional emotional intelligence scale, the instructions and tuned version of the TEA model really shone. It was able to recover the multidimensional structure of that survey much better than the standard version. This hints that when you have a survey with many different facets, giving the computer model a specific instruction like find the clusters of similar psychological items can really help it tease apart those different dimensions. They also found something interesting about reverse-worded items, those questions where you have to answer strongly disagree for a positive trait. For example, these reverse-worded items consistently stood out as semantic outliers across all the models. This means the computer models had a harder time fitting them into the overall picture. And it suggests we need to be extra careful when interpreting results from surveys with these kinds of items, especially when using AI. So, what does this all mean? The study confirms that text embeddings, especially from well-trained open-source multilingual models, can be a powerful tool for understanding the structure of questionnaires, even in languages other than English. This could speed up the process of creating and refining psychological scales. It also shows that model choice really matters. For Spanish language research, you want models that have been trained on a lot of Spanish data. Relying solely on models optimized for English might lead to less accurate results. And that bit about instruction tuning, that's a game changer for complex surveys. If you are building a multidimensional scale, using an instruction-tuned model with a clear prompt could really help you understand its structure before you even collect any data from people. However, it is not a perfect science. The study also pointed out that using just one metric to judge how well the computer model understood the survey isn't enough. Sometimes, a model might be good at seeing which items are closest neighbors in meaning, but miss the overall picture of how the survey is structured. That is why they used multiple ways to measure the agreement between the computer's understanding and the real. World data. One of the cool things about this study is that it used open source models. This means the tools are accessible to anyone, promoting transparency and making this kind of research more reproducible. It's a step towards a more democratic approach to AI in science. Now, what are the limitations here? The study only looked at a couple of specific Spanish questionnaires and a particular group of students in Peru. So we can't say for sure that these exact results would hold true for every Spanish speaker or for every possible type of survey. Also, the exact instructions given to the tuned model were just one possibility. More research could explore different ways of prompting these models to see if that makes an even bigger difference. And remember those reverse-worded items. The study highlights that current AI models don't inherently understand the opposite, meaning created by reversing a question. This is a potential pitfall where semantic similarity might trick us into thinking two items are very similar when, in terms of how they're scored, they're actually opposed. This is a really important takeaway for anyone designing or analyzing surveys. So, what is my take on all this? I think this research is super important because it bridges the gap between cutting-edge AI and the practical needs of psychology research, especially outside of English-speaking contexts. The idea that we can use free, accessible AI tools to improve how we build and understand psychological measures is really exciting. It empowers more researchers to use these powerful techniques. The fact that the multilingual models perform so well, especially the instruction ZN Tune 1 for the complex EQ-DNI survey, shows that these models are getting quite sophisticated. They can pick up on subtle semantic relationships and, with the right guidance, even disentangle complex structures. However, the limitations are crucial to remember. We can't just blindly trust an AI's output. We need to be aware of the model's training data, its potential biases like how it handles reversed and worded items, and the importance of using multiple evaluation methods. This isn't about replacing human expertise, but about augmenting it with powerful, accessible tools. Future research should definitely explore more Spanish Gen language instruments, different prompting strategies, and how these AI insights can be integrated into actual survey development pipelines to make them more robust and fair for everyone. What do you guys think about using AI to understand survey questions? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.